Okay, 6.3, the objective for today is students will be able to analyze the factors that transformed the American economy from an agrarian, also known as a farming society, to an industrial society. Okay. Inventions and innovations that helped us move from an agrarian farming society into more of an industrialized nation. The first is this idea of a corporation. And a corporation is when you have a group of people that run the company, or a group of people come together. And this was important because what it did was it limited liability. Meaning that if you have one person who is the president or one person who owns a company, it's easier to go after one person than it is to go after a group of people, because you're kind of protected by saying there's a whole group of us, so you'd have to come after all of us rather than just one person. So it changed the way companies worked, right? It changed the way that business worked. So then we had the Bessemer steel process. It made steel actually stronger and cheaper, which allowed us to build more things with steel. Light bulb was by Thomas Edison. And it allowed people to work longer hours because they were no longer limited by sunlight. Telephone, Alexander Graham Bell. Oh, I spelled it wrong. So Alexander Graham Bell, and just this led to improved communication. Airplane was invented by the Wright brothers. And then we had the assembly line by Henry Ford, which made cars more accessible to the public because they were cheaper and easier to make. Now, these are some of the industrial leaders that you're going to need to know. The first is Andrew Carnegie. And he was known for his steel, using the Bessemer steel process to make skyscrapers and bridges. The second man was J.P. Morgan, and he really changed the world of finance. Okay, here we have John D. Rockefeller. And he was the oil refinery. So a way to make cleaner oil, which was easier to use. And then finally we have Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was known for his involvement in the railroads. He was what we call a railroad tycoon. So we call these guys industrial leaders because they really were like kind of the men that built America, right? Made us into an industrial country. All right. Businesses. So we saw a huge increase in businesses during this time period. So some words that you need to know and be familiar with on why businesses kind of took over. We talked a little bit about corporations, but this is when we have large companies. That were owned by shareholders. Monopolies are when we see companies have little or no competition. And what that means, they can charge whatever they want. Then you have the trust companies. And trust companies are a version of a monopoly or a type of monopoly where you essentially buy up everything that you can. And laissez-faire is the idea that the government should stay out of business. So how did this all play a role with the environment? So how did the expansion of industrialization impact the environment? Well, first off, we had a lot of natural resources. So that allowed us to begin industry. But as industrialization continued, we saw a huge decrease in natural resource. A decrease in natural resources and increase in pollution. So the impact of industrialization was pollution, decrease of natural resources, and so then you eventually began to see people take action. To protect resources. Now, because we became a more industrialized nation, people had more time for what we call leisure activities. People got into sports, especially baseball. What we call the Duvel shows, and these were comedy acts. And then amusement parks and fairs that would travel around and people would go to.